Hey guys, welcome back to Honkai Star Rail. In today's video, we've got some official changes that they have announced on official channels from what we saw in the final closed beta. So I wanted to go through them. There's some pretty cool ones in here, and one that seemed pretty horrible at the start, but it's actually not that bad when we consider all the things that we have to play with. So the first thing I wanted to go through is once again, these are official statements that they've made on their social posts, whether it be through Bilibili for the CN version or HoYoLab for the English version. And something I just wanted to throw in is that I like to view these as just balancing changes. Sometimes when you look at stuff like this happening, the negative connotation can come around it about like they're nerfing characters or something like that, when in reality a beta is not a final product. It's just a development phase where they're trying to get feedback to balance the characters before they actually release them. So once again, I don't look at these as nerfs or buffs. I just look at them as balanced changes on the way the character is, and you know, it keeps me happy. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well, but let's get into it. So the first one that we have is a pretty decent change, and a massive shout out to Pridewin. I'll leave this linked in the description. They've made a whole blog post about it, which is super easy, so I don't have to open up a bunch of tabs. They've just put it side by side with the changes to all these things. So if you want to check through all these changes, I'll leave this linked in the description. But like I said, all the changes are listed here on Bilibili, and also some over on HoYoLab as well. So BRONYA. This one, when I first saw this, I thought this was going to like completely change the way we look at BRONYA. You know, she was going to drop in priority. But after you think about it a bit further, BRONYA is still an absolute savage. I still think she's like the #1 priority out of the beginner units. I think she's going to be fine. Now, what's happened to her is essentially they've added this text to the end of her skill. If the skill is used on BRONYA, it will no longer trigger the action forward by 100% part. So before, she used to be able to use her skill on herself and then use her basic attack. So each turn she was using and she wasn't generating or consuming any skill points. She was breaking even because she spend one to buff herself and then she would generate one with that. And because she has guaranteed crits, it means that her basic was just doing really good damage, but this was also allowing her to generate 50 energy per turn because she's getting 30 from the skill and 20 from the basic attack. And that was allowing her to generate her ult really quick and keep a massive amount of uptime on that ultimate. And that was a pretty cracked build that we saw some of the CN players using over on Bilibili. The CN players had a availability to spend in the game, so they had a lot more stuff than we did to test with. And some of the replays I saw were crazy. The other thing you could do with her, if you paired her with like something like Arlen, she could buff herself and then sometimes buff herself again just to get the ult up and then basic, or she could buff herself and then just buff Arlen. And you could get some crazy combos depending on your skill point management. However, now she can't do that to herself, but when we go over and take a look at her kit, there's just basically the other way to play her that is also really fantastic, but just got overlooked because she had this crazy combo. And this one to me is also crazy. When we look at her talent, after using her basic attack only, BRONYA's next action will be advanced forward. Now, this is great. Now, the 15 is at base, the 30 is at free-to-play max, and the 33 is with max eidolons. Now, the cool thing about this is that it means she's going to generate a ton of skill points. The fact that she's boosting her action gauge every turn, you're probably going to be playing her on speed. She's going to be super fast and she's going to take a lot of turns. So she's going to generate that ult really quickly. Now, yes, being that she's only generating 20 energy per attack, now we can definitely enhance that with light cones, relics, whatever you want. But essentially, she's not generating as much as a skill would generate and definitely not as much as a skill than a basic would generate. But because she's getting that advanced forward, she's using a lot more of those basic attacks, which turn her into like an amazing battery for the team of generating an enormous amount of skill points. So you can play her as a basic attack spammer and then just use her ultimate, which will have a high uptime because she's using so many basic attacks. And then you can use her skill as more of a tech option depending on the situation. If you've got an excess of skill points, you can use her skill just to buff your ally, your damage dealer, so that they can have another attack. Or you can use it in tech situation to buff your healer to get an extra heal. Like it becomes a real tech option in her skill when she's mainly built around basic spamming, and I still think she's an absolutely amazing unit like that. Once again, she's still going to be guaranteed to crit with her basic attack, so they're still going to be doing okay, just not as crazy as they were with the buff, but I think it just changes the way she plays. She goes from a neutral skill point unit to a massively positive skill point unit, which allows you to really run with units like Zila, who consumes a lot, especially if she is getting kills and she's using multiple skills in a row. So I still think Bronya is completely fine. Yes, that change was a little bit of a shock when I first saw it, but in general, I think she's still the best unit from the beginner banner characters. I will probably update my reroll tier list because there's some other changes in here that get me excited. So let's go down. Moving on to Welt. Welt's got a change, but once again, these descriptions are very vague, so we don't know exactly. One of his traces used to before increase his ultimate damage by 25%. Now, after using his ultimate, the targets affected will receive more damage for X turns. Now, the X turns is going to be important, and so is how much extra damage they receive. But in general, this is just making me view Welt more as a supportive unit, not as a damaging unit. His damage isn't crazy. It's okay. But like when we look at him as a supporting unit, that means his damage looks a lot more inviting and his support is getting better, because at the end of the day, him providing extra damage to your allies is going to give more of a benefit, in my opinion, than his ult just dealing a bit of extra damage, because his ult's damage isn't crazy, especially if you're only fighting one enemy. That means that enemy is going to take more damage from your single target nuker that you're bringing in the team. So I think this is, in my opinion, depending on numbers, going to be an improvement to Welt, but we'll have to wait and see. And it feels like it's just moving him more into that supportive role other than the DPS type mixed role. I just view him more as a pure support unit now, with like good damage for a support unit, essentially. Then we check out Himiko. Now, Himiko, this is the one why I want to update a reroll tier list, because I think Himiko is actually not too bad now. I really do like this change to her. Basically, with one of her traces, it used to be that her basic attack could apply a burn. Now, the updated version that we've got, and this one was over here on Hoyo Lab, is that Himiko's attacks have a chance to inflict burn on enemies for a number of turns. With burn, the enemy takes 5 dot damage at the start of each turn. Now, we're going to have to see what the multiplier is and how many turns it is. But I just think the fact that now it just says Himiko's attacks, so this will include her basic attack, her skill, her ultimate, her passive. I'm pretty sure it includes the passive because it should proc. Don't know, we'll have to test that when the game launches, but in general, it just means she can apply the burn without gimping her rotation by having to use a basic attack. And I think especially if we're looking at, in Chaos Memory or something like that, if we have 2 enemy bosses in one wave that are both weak to fire, this just really enhances her effect because she's going to be able to deal that extra burn damage. When we look at her trace upgrades, she gains attack and fire damage. So those are both going to contribute to the damage that a burn dot can deal. And I know it sounds silly that it's just a small change, but I really do think this enhances my view of Himiko a lot. And if I get her, I'm honestly not that disappointed. I think Himiko just keeps looking better to me the more I research her and the more we look at her, and plus the more they change her like this. This is pretty solid. So I'm happy with this Himiko change. Honestly, all these changes I'm pretty cool with. Like Welt seems like a buff, Himiko seems like a buff, and Bronya seems like a nerf to one style of play, but it just forces us into another style of play, which is also absolutely fantastic. Now, they have included some of the light cone changes, because over here on Bilibili, they did include some of the light cones over here, and on the light cones, they actually included all the percentages, and that's what's changed. So we had some percentage changes from what the previous beta was, but I'm not going to go deep into all those because at the moment, we haven't even got our hands on the game. So we're just looking at characters in preparation. We will look at light cones maybe 1 week into the game, maybe 2 weeks into the game. We'll see how we go. We'll get deeper into light cones in the future. It's not the most important thing right now, looking at some of the, 4-star light cones before we even have the game. But if you want to go ahead and check out these changes, I will leave this link in the description and you can go and check it out. But as always, guys, that is going to be it for this one. Thanks for watching. Hope you have an awesome day, and I look forward to seeing the next one. Cheers.